Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Kearns, and I'll be your moderator tonight. First and foremost, welcome to this community outreach meeting on March 16th, 2022 for Healing Gardens LLC, a proposed marijuana product manufacturer and Tier 2 marijuana cultivator. The facility is proposed to be located at 19 Richards Road in Plymouth, Massachusetts, 02360. Today we have with us Quinn Heath as a representative from Healing Gardens. The meeting will open with a presentation on the proposed establishment, followed by an opportunity for community engagement and questions. We ask that you hold all questions until the end of the presentation, at which point I'll open the floor. And with that, I'll let Quinn take it away.
Thanks. As Nathan said, this is an informational meeting about a proposed cannabis cultivation and product manufacturing facility that's going to be located at 19 Richards Road in Plymouth, Massachusetts. This is an initial informational meeting for the abutters and other interested members of the community. This business will have to apply for state licenses and potentially local permits as well. So there will be more opportunities for both state government feedback and feedback of the community before it opens. So I'm going to cover some information that we're legally required to cover tonight, but there is going to be an opportunity for people if you have questions at the end. So the first piece of information that I'm required to cover is the type of marijuana establishment that will be located at here. That's going to be a cultivation facility and a product manufacturing facility. Product manufacturing is a generally low impact use that's typically similar to an industrial kitchen. A product manufacturer is where the marijuana plant is processed into either oils, extracts, edibles, lotions, or topicals. Any kind of good that's processed and manufactured from that original plant material is going to be made at a product manufacturer. There's also going to be a Tier 2 cultivation facility at this address. That's a very small cultivator. There are 10 tiers total that go up to 100,000 square feet, and there's 11 tiers total, and this is only a Tier 2. So it's going to be generally a pretty small facility, despite having 2 licenses in one location. They'll be cultivating and product manufacturing, and that'll actually help keep any necessary traffic to the facility down, because some of the operations and cultivating can be done with product that's actually grown at that facility. So we'll move on to the second item that we're required to cover tonight, and that's information to demonstrate that this location is going to be maintained securely. Any kind of cannabis operator in the state of Massachusetts has a whole host of security rules that they're required to follow, and this business in Plymouth is no different. Included in those security regulations are things such as security camera coverage, alarm systems, limited access areas, and visitor intake procedures. So I'll talk a bit about each of those briefly. On the security cameras and video cameras, there's a lot of actual requirements that the business has to meet when they're selecting a provider for those services. Those cameras have to have 24/7 coverage of any movement in the facility, and those cameras need to be pointed at all the entrances and exits. The vaults and anywhere that marijuana is really being handled regularly is going to have video monitoring. So the business will really know who's coming in and who's leaving. Any areas that contain marijuana or cash vaults are going to have video cameras. These cameras are going to have HD footage. So anytime you have to be able to pull a clear picture, and that's important so that law enforcement or state regulators, if there is a reason for an investigation, can see the kind of pictures of who is going in and out. Those videos have to also have a time, date, and location stamp on them for obvious reasons. And there's also data retention policies. So video recordings have to be stored for 90 days. But if there is a reason for a law enforcement or a state regulatory investigation, that retention period can be longer. In addition to the video cameras, they're going to have certain alarm systems. So that includes 2 main types of alarms, really. There's going to be panic alarm buttons. That's like you would see at a bank, a duress alarm under the counter where you can press a button to summon law enforcement or security. You're also going to see perimeter alarms on the doors and the windows of this facility. So there really shouldn't be any way in or out of this building without setting off some kind of alarm and with video footage being captured of who's going in and out. And also you're going to have limited access areas. So any operator has to take a look at their facility and they have to sketch out which areas are actually going to be having marijuana processed and handled. Since this isn't a retail facility, members of the public aren't coming in and out of this building. So really most of the building is going to be limited and the public is not going to be able to access it. The only people who are going to be able to access the building are people who have been registered as agents with the business, who have gone through a background check process and gotten an ID, or visitors who follow the visitor intake procedures I'll talk about in a moment. These limited access areas themselves have to have their own security features, including commercial grade locks for entry with access logs. Typically, you'll see marijuana businesses will give their employees key fobs that they have to swipe to enter an area. And that's important both to limit access, but also for security of the facility generally, because then you can pull up a log and you actually have to monitor those logs of who's going in and out of different areas and whether anyone's accessing areas that they're not allowed to be in. So finally, there's also going to have to be visitor intake procedures. As I said, this is not going to be a publicly accessible facility. So really the only people who are allowed to be in this facility under state regulations are people who have an actual purpose. Visitors have to be 21 years old and their identification needs to be checked, and they're going to have to be signed in into a visitor log. So really no one is entering and leaving this facility without some kind of log being generated and without video being taken of them. So really this is one of the most secure establishments that you can have. There's a lot of rules and regulations that go in place and a lot of security features that need to be put in place before you can even open. And all of these also need to have ongoing maintenance. You need to examine your security plan and make sure that it's kind of working each year. And there's times that you need to notify local law enforcement as well, if, for example, a product goes missing. So that moves us on to the third of 5 items that we need to cover tonight. And that's going to be the steps that are being taken by this marijuana establishment in Plymouth to prevent diversion to minors. This is something that that Healing Gardens takes very seriously, and that most cannabis businesses in the state all take very seriously. And there's a lot of actual regulations and procedures in place in order to prevent product from getting to minors. So as Healing Gardens is going to be doing product manufacturing, there'll be a lot of things that go in place in the packaging. There's a lot of child safe packaging that has to go in place and warnings on those, as well as consumer education. But there's a lot of actual direct security procedures as well. Visitor intake procedures, as I said, are going to limit minors from ever entering the facility. Even a law enforcement member who's under the age of 21 isn't technically allowed to enter a cannabis facility in Massachusetts. There's also what's called seed to sale tracking. So every marijuana plant in Massachusetts is tagged and logged, and it's tracked from the moment that it's kind of grown as a baby plant up until it's sold in whatever final manufactured product to individuals. So in the event that a product is learned, that the Healing Gardens learns that product is being diverted to minors by somebody that they're supplying their products to, they can take steps to terminate that relationship quickly and partner with other businesses. As I said, these are going to be mainly business to business transactions. There's not going to be direct to consumer sales at this facility. So the fourth item that we're legally required to cover tonight is the plan by the marijuana establishment to positively impact the community. This is important. All cannabis businesses in Massachusetts have to take steps in order to kind of take steps to right the wrongs and the disproportionate harms that the war on drugs have had. So any business will obviously take steps to positively impact the community because they want to be a good neighbor. But this refers specifically to the plan that will be submitted as part of the state licensure application for this business. We're still discussing what the positive impact plan will look like, but oftentimes we recommend that clients work with individuals who need their criminal records sealed, because the war on drugs has led to a lot of people having criminal records for cannabis possession, for example, that might not even be a crime now. And there's steps that you can take in order to remove those entries from your criminal record. So often we recommend that businesses help connect people with those services. There's also a number of state organizations that work both in areas of disproportionate impact. Those are areas that the state commission has found have been really negatively impacted by the war on drugs, or with other groups that are defined as people who have been disproportionately impacted by the state commission. So if you have any recommendations on organizations or programs that you think would be a good fit for Healing Gardens and for Plymouth, Massachusetts, please feel free to let me know at this meeting, and I'll definitely bring it up with the business. And that brings us to the final item that we're going to cover tonight, which is information to demonstrate that this location is not going to constitute a nuisance, as that term is defined by law. So being a cannabis business in Massachusetts does not in any way exempt you from the regular laws about nuisance. Businesses aren't allowed to be a nuisance in their community if they're causing a large stink, or if they're causing other harms to the people nearby, or if you're interfering with the quiet enjoyment of property. You can bring a lawsuit or another legal claim just as you could against any other business against Healing Gardens. That said, Healing Gardens is really dedicated to being a good neighbor. They're going to take steps to really mitigate any traffic concerns, of which there shouldn't be many because this is a small industrial type of business. You're not going to see a large staff or consumers coming in and out. And then you'll also see the Healing Gardens will take a lot of steps to mitigate odor. I know that's a big concern in a lot of communities. As an indoor operation, it's actually really important for Healing Gardens to mitigate odor, not only for the members of the community, but for the business itself. If odor is not being filtered by the air filters, that means that other microbes from the outside are able to get into the building. And that can actually be very harmful for the crop, because these crops all need to be tested. They all need to be meet certain standards. So in addition to just being a good neighbor, Healing Gardens is going to really have an incentive to make sure that there's not odor and take steps to reduce it. So that covers all of the information that we're legally required to cover at this meeting, but we're also going to open it up for public questions. So I'll turn it back over to Nathan to lead that process.
Thanks, Quinn. I see we have one member in the audience tonight. If you have any questions about the proposed establishment, you feel free to signal me with the raise hand button and I can turn it over to you.
All right. I'll just give it 1 second.
Any questions, Lauren?
All right. Well, if we don't have any questions from the public, then I think we'll close for tonight. But thank you very much for coming out.
All right. With that, we'll conclude this community outreach meeting. Have a good night, everyone.